Good morning. My name is Dr. Melissa Hall, and I'm the Department Head of Family and Human Services. I'm back today to continue our study on the book of Acts. Today, I'm looking at Acts chapter 18, and I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite characters in the Bible. But first, let me open in prayer. Jesus, I thank you for the opportunity for us to study your word. I pray that you use it in the life of all who hear. May we cling to your word during this time. Amen. Today, I'm going to continue our teaching in Acts by talking to you about the character in the Bible, Priscilla. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about Priscilla because her story had a big impact on my own life. As a young girl in the faith, I longed to know my place in the kingdom. I wanted to be able to see myself through Jesus' eyes. And there are things about Priscilla and the way she was written about that helped me see that more clearly. It helped me tangibly see and understand God's love for women. I have two boys, they're 6 and 8. And when they're asked about the heroes of their faith, I hope they talk about Daniel in the lion's den and David and Goliath. But I also hope they talk about Tabitha being raised from the dead, because her life and ministry were literally irreplaceable. I hope they boast about the bravery of Ruth and the cleverness of Esther. Because when we understand the stories of women in the Bible, we have a fuller, more complete picture of who God is and how he radically loved all. Now, to understand the importance of Priscilla, you have to take note of the culture of her time, and you have to look at it through the context of her day. If you read the Bible simply from a 2020 perspective, you'll miss the radical nature of it. The Bible was written in a patriarchal culture, and when Priscilla was introduced, Greco-Roman household codes were in place. The codes of this time required almost nothing of head of households treatment towards women, and the value of women and their place in the world was not high, and they had very little rights. So when you see something different, take note. It's pretty special. And there are several things to take note of in Acts chapter 18. So let's take a look. Here are a few things about Priscilla that have always stood out to me and had a pretty big impact on my life and work. The first, Priscilla and her husband worked together. She was a business owner. The words of Acts chapter 18, verse 3 record that by trade they were tent makers. Notice the word they, meaning she was actively involved in the family business. Her contribution had value, so much so that it was worth noting. Second thing, throughout the Bible, her name was often listed first. In fact, of the 7 times we read about Priscilla and her husband, her name is listed first 5 times. It's unusual to find texts from the ancient world or stories in the Bible where the woman's name is before her husband's. But in the letters to Paul, Priscilla is often named before her husband Aquila. And really, they were pretty interchangeable. It seems like in the minds of the early Christians, they were viewed as a team. In fact, we hear about Aquila by himself 0 times. In a male-dominated culture, this is really worth noting. I'm often asked as a therapist if there's a marriage in the Bible that inspires me, and this one may be it. Priscilla seems to have been an equal partner in the marriage. I like to imagine that Aquila was behind the scenes cheering her on and that they giggled together when people scoffed at her name being listed first. Because they were in a culture where he could have easily pushed her to the shadows, but he clearly let her shine. I think that's pretty worth noting. The third thing, if you look in Acts chapter 18 and go down into verses 18 through 26, you can see that Priscilla was trusted by Paul to help manage the infant church and to help teach the gospel. In fact, Priscilla and Aquila instructed Apollos, who would go on to be one of the most influential apostles of that day. In Acts 18, verse 24, it says, "Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with thorough knowledge of the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he knew only of the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately." So what that tells me is when one of the most influential apostles of that day needed more training, God thought of Priscilla and Aquila. They held authority about the teachings of Jesus in that time, and they were leaders in the growing community. They seemed to equally share in a ministry in a healthy, God-fearing way. And in fact, the Bible talks about Priscilla throughout the New Testament. They talk about her being a dear friend to Paul. Paul mentions her often and greets her warmly throughout the Bible. It talks about her risking her life to help Paul. It talks about her teaching people, hosting a church in her home, and setting out on missionary journeys. She was clearly a force to be reckoned with, and God used her powerfully in the early church. So, if you did not know these things about Priscilla today, I hope that they help you see God's love a little more fully, and that you see him more completely. I encourage you to take some time and share the story with the women in your life. Make sure they know how radically God loved women and continues to love women. The thing about Jesus is that he took notice of all people. He valued women, children, immigrants, the broken, and he didn't just notice them, he used them, and he included them in their kingdom work. I pray that you know that you're valued by Jesus, that you're needed, that you're seen, that he pursues you, and that you never forget that he's writing your story and mending the pieces of your life together for his purpose, and that he weaves you into his story. Let me close in prayer. Jesus, thank you for our time together. I pray that each and every student listening is able to rest in your love and purpose for them. Keep us well and safe. Be there for those who are hurting and bring your healing quickly. Amen.